One of the questions I get asked most often is if I have any recommendations for books, podcasts, newsletters, etc. I read about 50 to 60 books a year, so I figured the best place to start is my top 5 books for anyone who wants to learn about venture capital. These are basically required reading, in my opinion, for anyone interested in investing in startups. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe to get notified about my upcoming videos on my other top recommendations for podcasts you should listen to, newsletters that you should follow, news sources to follow, and more. And stick to the end because I'm going to throw in one more bonus recommendation for anyone interested in dipping their toe in the angel investing world. Okay, so let's get started with my recommendations. And yes, this is my suggested reading order if you haven't read these already. All right, the first book is 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel and Blake Masters. This book was written based on the notes from Peter Thiel's Stanford MBA class. I love this book. I think it is one of the foundational books that you need to read if you want to work in the realm of startups and investing. The core idea of this book is that true innovation involves creating something entirely new, going from 0 to 1 rather than an incremental change, which would be going from 1 to 2. Most of the time in business and in the world, people go from 1 to 2. It takes real innovation, hard work, a ton of risk, and a little bit of luck to actually build something that goes from 0 to 1 that's truly innovative and transformative. The other thing he talks about is monopolies versus competitions. Peter Thiel argues that monopolies aren't a dirty word, that they actually drive progress, while competition can actually hinder it. Successful startups should aim to build monopolies by offering unique value. And your job as a venture capitalist is to find and invest in the next big monopolies, because that's how you're going to generate a huge return and, frankly, have a massive impact on society. The other thing that he hits on that's really important to understand in the world of startups is contrarian thinking. It encourages entrepreneurs to challenge conventional wisdom and seek opportunities that others oftentimes overlook. One of my favorite parts is where he talks about his favorite question that he likes to ask people in interviews. That question is, what important truth do very few people agree with you on? The reason why he uses it is because it helps reveal contrarian thinking, a core theme of the book. He believes that great startups are built on secrets or insights that most people don't yet recognize. Think about Airbnb as a classic example of this. In the early days, it didn't really exist. This concept of letting a complete stranger into your house and them paying you a little bit of money for the privilege was such a foreign concept to ourselves. But the founders had figured it out that people were willing to do it. They were willing to go to a total stranger's house and sleep there overnight. They were willing to pay for it, and there were people that were anxious to make some additional income and take on that risk and do it. And so today, you now have Airbnb, which is a company that generates billions and billions of profits and revenue for its investors, but something that really just didn't even exist 2 decades ago. Another example of this is a lot of people believe that AI will eliminate jobs, but a contrarian might say AI will create more meaningful work by automating drudgery and open us up to do more creative and interesting things. He also talks in the book about why he believes that innovation and technology will be the thing that pushes society forward over globalization, which is frankly what we've seen over the last decade or so. Anyways, so that's 0 to 1. Check it out if you haven't read it yet. It's not very thick. You can get through it fairly quickly, but it has a lot of foundational principles that I think you really need to understand if you want to play in the venture capital game. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is The Venture Mindset. Now, this book is fantastic. It's written by a professor at Stanford who focuses on venture capital and startups for all of his research and teaching. I met him at a limited partner conference last year where he talked about the 9 principles that he identified in this book. The thing that I love about these 9 principles is that they're all backed by data that he's accumulated over the last several decades. And so rather than just being his hypotheses, these are all data backed and proven with, rigorous examples. The first one is that home runs matter, but strikeouts don't. And in fact, the sin in venture capital is not that you lost money. It's that you missed out on the deal that ends up becoming Google, right? Mark Andreessen is famously quoted as saying, there are only a handful of deals that matter in any given year, and your job as a venture capitalist is to make sure that you're in as many of those as possible. And to the extent you fail as a venture capitalist is because you didn't get into one of those. The reason for that is because in venture capital, your downside is you lose your money, right? 1x your capital. But the upside is that you could return 1,000x, 2,000x your capital. And so losing a handful is okay as long as you get into one or two deals that return a massive amount of money. And in venture capital, there's this idea of the power law, which I'm going to talk about some more later, wherein there's only a few deals that would generate huge returns, but the returns from those few deals are so massive that they more than make up for all of the other losses across the entire industry. So your job is to get into one of those main deals. Some of the other things that he talks about is getting outside of the four walls. So going out and engaging with lots of different people, having diverse networks, seek new ideas. And frankly, this is the thing that I love most about my job, is that I'm constantly learning about new businesses, new business models, new technologies, meeting new people. It's really, really fun. And effective VCs, you're a little bit of like a, jack of all trades, master of none, in that like you have to understand a little bit of a lot of different areas so you can identify interesting opportunities and trends. Another thing he talks about is preparing your mind. So the way I think about this principle is you need to be in the market before you buy something so that you know when something is a good deal or not. And if you're not in the market, you won't know and you'll end up making bad bets. So that just means that you're like out there doing deals, learning as much as you can, being curious, and so forth. I'm not going to go through all 9 principles because I don't want to take away that opportunity to learn from you. But some of the other things that really stood out to me are things like his principle to agree to disagree. So when you're evaluating these startups, they're very, very risky. And the likelihood is most startups will fail. And so what you find is the very best investments tend to be the most controversial, even within a venture capital fund. People will argue back and forth of whether or not it's ultimately going to be a good deal. And the data actually shows that the more conflict there is, the more likelihood that the deal has potential of becoming a real home run.
You know what? You're really pissing me off right now. I'm going to say something rude to you.
No,
and I don't want to say something rude to you.
Because you're not a rude
so I'm just
guy.
going to go.
If there's too much consensus, then everybody kind of agrees and sees that there's an opportunity there, and the valuations tend to get pushed up and things become too competitive to really drive a great outcome. And so this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1. You really want to have a contrarian viewpoint, but you also don't want to be right. So anyways, it's okay to have disagreement on deals, and actually like having uniformity and unanimity when making investment decisions can actually be a hindrance rather than a help. The other thing that he talks about that I think is great is this idea of doubling down or quitting. So because this whole industry operates off a power law, what you end up having is you have a few startups that do really well and you have a lot of losses. One of the big traps that a lot of VCs fall into, especially new ones, is they put a little bit of money into all their deals, and then the companies that take off, they don't keep putting more money into them because those companies don't need the money. And instead they put their money into all the companies that are losing, trying to save them, when in reality what they should do is when it becomes obvious that those companies aren't going to make it, they should cut them off early and they should plow more money into their winners. Anyways, I really like this book and highly recommend you pick it up. Got a lot of great data-driven insights that can really improve your investing as a venture capitalist, and honestly, help you avoid certain pitfalls that I see happen all the time. Okay, this one might be a little bit of a surprise because it likely doesn't show up on very many lists. But I love this book because it takes you through the life cycle of a startup from the CFO's perspective. The book is To Pixar and Beyond, which is the story of the company Pixar from the time it was founded all the way through its IPO and eventually through its acquisition by Disney. All written from the perspective of the CFO. Now, the thing is, when you're working in venture capital, you're oftentimes working with the CEO founder, but you're also oftentimes working with the CFO. What I love about this book is that it takes you through that whole journey. And so you understand a little bit better what it's like to be a founder and to engage with an angel investor, in this case, Steve Jobs. You also get some insight into what is the process like to go public? What are the pros and cons of doing it? And also, what is the process of going through a merger or an acquisition? Two things that are really important because IPOs and acquisitions are how most venture capitalists are able to exit their investments. I think it also provides a lot of empathy for founders and those that are starting on the startup journey. So it's a great book if you've never gone through that process before of starting a company and taking it all the way through IPO, which very few of us have done. And for me, like it was, with the first time I read it, it was really insightful in terms of like being able to see through the eyes of the founder and the CFO and the things that they were thinking about and worrying about, as well as like having a better understanding for how negotiation happens during M&A processes and through an IPO. Okay, so if I had a favorite, it would probably be The Power Law. Building on the principle of the Power Law, it lays out the history of the modern venture capital industry and how each wave of innovation and investing was created by different firms and individuals. It is only through understanding the past that you can understand how we got to where we are today and understand why things are structured the way they are. You need to know why things are structured the way they are if you're going to have a chance at disrupting them or even just succeeding in that industry. That's why I love this book. The core idea here is that venture capital operates under the power law, where a few investments yield outsized returns. It also traces the venture capital history, the evolution of venture capital from its origins to its current global impact. It hits on lots of different influential firms and profiles key venture capitalists and their investment philosophies, from which you can learn a lot. Some of the things that are really helpful from this book is just understanding who the people are, the firms, their approaches, why they exist, why people respect firms like Sequoia and Andreessen and the investors behind them. And so it's a great primer for those that are just entering the space, but even those that have been around for a long time, like I've been doing this for 15 years. This book just came out a few years ago. I learned so much reading through it, and there's so many fun stories in there that I think you'll really enjoy it. Okay, so the last book is the one that's usually on like everybody's list for venture capital, and I have to admit it's very good and I do recommend it, but it does read a little bit like a textbook, so just keep that in mind. It's got great stories and everything and the writing is well done, but it's more of, a reference material in a lot of cases. This book is really good for helping you understand the ins and outs of term sheets, probably the most critical document in venture investing. This is required reading essentially for every VC so that you understand how term sheets are structured, the pros and the cons of different terms, what things can be pushed on, which things can't, or at least probably shouldn't be. And it's based on decades of experience from two of the best in the business, all condensed in these pages. Whenever a friend of mine gets a job in venture capital, if they haven't read this book because they're transitioning from another area, it's the book that I send them. With my congratulations on coming over to the dark side. It's also a great book if you're not interested in VC, but you're just a founder and you want to understand your terms and the term sheets better so that you can go into the negotiations with more knowledge and power. Also, I found that a lot of founders will sometimes use attorneys that don't have a lot of experience doing startup law, which one, I think is a mistake. You should always find an attorney who specializes in startup law. But, to the extent that that's not possible for you, highly recommend reading this book to help give you that edge. Okay, so you stuck around with me to the very end. And so let me share one more book. That is the book Angel by Jason Calacanis. If you're looking to break into venture capital or just start angel investing, Angel by Jason is a must read in my opinion. It's a no BS playbook from someone who backed Uber, Robinhood, and Calm in the very early days. His core message? Don't chase averages, chase outliers. Make a lot of small bets, back founders more than ideas, and be insanely helpful if you want a shot at the best deals. He talks about losing money on 9 out of 10 startups and still coming out ahead, as long as you can hit one good unicorn. Whether you're deploying $1,000 or $1 million, this book will rewire how you think about early stage investing. What I love most is that his writings are very tactical in nature. The specific things you should do or not do, not just a lot of theory that you have to translate into practice. I highly recommend this to anyone even thinking about angel investing. I've seen so many angels make massive mistakes, usually by over-allocating in deals, and then have nothing to show for it and exiting the market. This is a tragedy because if done right and properly understood, angel investing can be hugely gratifying. So this is like one of my go-to highly recommended books for anyone that wants to start investing in startups. I hope you check it out. Do Do you have any favorite books that I might have missed, or are you curious about my thoughts on any books you're considering? Throw them down in the comments. There's a very good chance that I've read that book, and I'd love to chat with you about it. And as I've said before, if you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe and watch for my future recommendations, or check out my video where I talk about the top 5 questions VCs ask in job interviews. Thanks.